Hi, it's Mike DelSignore, Massachusetts OUI Lawyer. In today's video, I wanted to talk about 3 common mistakes sometimes people make when trying to decide how to handle an OUI case. First thing I see happening is assuming the case cannot be won because there's breath test evidence. Keep in mind, a breathalyzer does not always come into evidence, so you can still win the case even if the breathalyzer is over 0.08. There are ways to fight the case, fight the admissibility of the breath test. So don't assume that you can't win the case just because you took a breathalyzer. If the breathalyzer is excluded based on a legal motion, a judge or jury won't consider the results. After 30 days, when you take a breath test and it's over 0.08, you can get your full license back. So you won't be off the road for very long. The downside is if you resolve the case, you do face another 45-day suspension. But in my opinion, it's worth it to look at all the evidence, make sure the case can't be won before rushing into a resolution of the case. Second mistake I see people make in OUI cases, assuming that the police report is the full version. Now, when I read a police report, I'm reading what the officer said, but I'm reading it in a much different way than somebody who has never done an OUI case before. If you've never had anyone can read a police report, but if you've never read these before, you're probably going to think it's horrible. Most reports sound bad. When I read the report, based on my years of experience, I'm filling in the gaps in the case. So one thing that I'm doing is I'm anticipating how the officer will testify. So I might see something like, failed the 9-step walk and turn unsteady on his feet, missed heel to toe. You might think, oh, geez, that sounds bad. When I read that, I realize that when I cross-examine this witness, I'm going to basically get a lot out of them. That's not in the report, but I know I can from years of experience that, hey, you took 9 steps out, you turned properly, you didn't stop while walking, and that it's not specific on where you were unsteady, where you missed heel to toe. So generally most officers will say, well, most steps were fine, but there was 1 or 2 issues. So then what I'll do is I'll say, it's certainly possible in 18 total steps somebody could have stepped off or had a misstep, been nervous, but it's not related to alcohol. So don't assume that when you read a police report, the case is as bad as it sounds. You should always have a lawyer, preferably one that's done a lot of OUI cases, review the report, because there's things that are not in the report that if you've never done this kind of work before, you might not know you did well. The police only put the negative details in the report. So everything you did well, inconsistent with their opinion, is going to be left out of the report. So that's the second common mistake I see people make when deciding how to handle an OUI case. 1, assuming the case can't be won because of a breath test. 2, reading the report and thinking the case can't be won. Always talk to a lawyer that's done a lot of OUI cases. And the third issue that I see, or the third problem people make when trying to decide how best to handle an OUI case, is to not really appreciate the potential penalties and how a continuance without a finding is not such a great disposition. No. So in other words, when you take a continuance without a finding, you're admitting to the OUI offense. In many cases, after trial, you're going to get substantially the same disposition. So a third mistake I see people make is rushing into a plea of a continuance without a finding. Make sure you have all the evidence. Make sure you have the video. Make sure you understand the license implications. Make sure you understand everything, how you're going to be impacted. And don't worry, the continuance without a finding is not going anywhere. So you don't need to rush into a plea. You can look at all your options and make the best decision for yourself, for your family, based on work. So there's a lot of variables that go into this. So don't rush into a plea of a continuance without a finding. And additionally, if you think you need any help, it's always a good idea to get help. It's never a bad thing. The court's never going to assume you have a problem if you get some kind of treatment. So if you think you need any kind of treatment, help, alcohol treatment, whether it's a first offense, if it's a second or third offense, you probably should get it just for the case, especially third offenses. But if it's a first offense and you think, well, this has been a problem, get help, because it's not going to ever be negative. No one's ever going to use it. A lot of people think that but that's a common misconception. And another common mistake people make is they assume, well, can I plead not guilty if I'm guilty? So sometimes people think, well, they know in their heart of hearts that they shouldn't have been driving, that they had too much alcohol. And I think sometimes, and I talk to people all the time about this, there's a tendency to think, I need to resolve the case because I know the person knows they did something wrong. That's not the legal standard. The legal standard is they're going to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So don't confuse the two. You can make any changes you want in your life voluntarily. You can still be found not guilty. Make the changes. Realize that, hey, I made a bad decision. We don't hold ourselves as humans to the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. We hold ourselves much higher standard. We want to be the best. So don't feel as though that you need to resolve the case sometimes to punish yourself or because you know you made a bad choice. They still got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. It's different from a moral standard. So these are the three things that I see people sometimes make mistakes on. One, rushing into a plea of a quaff. Two, assuming you can't win a case with a breath test. Three, reading the report and thinking it's worse than it actually is. If you want help with an OUI case, evaluating the police report, making the best decisions for yourself, for your family, call, text anytime. My name is Mike DelSignore. Here to help, 781-686-5924.